And today we're going to go over some more D&D horror stories. All of these stories come from the subreddit RPG Horror Stories. So settle in, get ready, let's get into it. This story comes from the usual love buns. This story is a little heavy if you don't really want to deal with themes like sexual assault and abuse. I do recommend you skip this one. I will put up a, where you can skip to so you can avoid it. But putting out there, it's quite heavy, it's very serious. If you can't handle that right now or you just don't want to handle it, go ahead and skip. How my ex-boyfriend outed himself as an abuser through D&D. Content warning, slightly not safe for work, vague mentions of sexual assault and abuse, and a foolish 18-year-old girl making foolish 18-year-old girl mistakes. So as a quick preface, I was raised by a very strange, crazy lady. I was told fantasy, sci-fi, comic books, basically anything not Barbie or Easy Bake was not for girls. Among a lot of worse stuff that may have something to do with why I was 18 dating a 26-year-old. So the second she was out of my life, I dove headfirst into all of it, and maybe got a little obsessive. At some point, my boyfriend, at the time, ended up telling me that a friend of his wanted to DM a short beginner campaign for his new players. Obviously, I was all in, but had no idea how to proceed. The players were me, 17 to 18, ex-boyfriend, 26-ish, and DM in his 30s, plus one other player who I did not remember much of, but I do remember he played a homebrewish monk. The DM worked very closely with me on my character, an elf cleric of a homebrew religion. Her name was Asha, and she was a very shy, quiet, nun-like character with immense amounts of devotion to her homebrew goddess. He had helped me make a low-maintenance RP character who also had very strong ties to the lore, the world, and the planned plot. It was great for my personality, and honestly, a very nice way to slowly wade into the waters of D&D, especially with RP. The DM also told me in private that I was going to be something of a MacGuffin, as Aisha's goddess would commune with her through dreams and visions, but I would have the final say on what to share with my party, both in-game and out of character. The basic plot was that a sect of Aisha's religion was becoming a cult and warping the religion, so Aisha's goddess sent her on a mission to squash the heretics. Ex-boyfriend rolled a tiefling warlock, who he named after his own gamertag, let's call it 7. So Aisha and Monk meet up and have the same goal. Turns out the cult has taken over the monk's temple and killed his best friend. Aisha doesn't trust strangers who are not of her religion, but her goddess tells her to work with the monk. Okay, cool. Then we meet 7. Aisha insta-hates him, he's a warlock and she's a religious fanatic. Monk convinces Aisha to let the warlock join us as he has some secret mission from his patron that at least somewhat aligns with what Aisha and Monk wants. She doesn't like it, but she trusts Monk because her goddess said she should. 7 instantly starts to hate on Aisha. She's rejected awkwardly, both in-game and out of character, but it's not too bad. It kinda makes sense that an evil warlock would get a kick out of making this goody two-shoes feel uncomfortable. We have a few fun fights, meet a PC who Asha really likes and gets a great vibe off of, but can't convince to join us because I failed the charisma checks. She's mad shy and timid. And as she's expressing this affection to the NPC, 7 gets mad and tries to steal from him in his own home. Aisha gets mad and calls him out, I never said she was subtle, and instead of dropping the random thing he stole, 7 decides to attack the NPC. Guards get called, DM goes easy on us and instead of TPKing us has us kicked out of the city. This is when 7 kicks it up. He begins making much harder, stronger moves than Aisha, and out of character I'm beginning to feel really uncomfortable. I'm new to RP and also at the time I was very uncomfortable with public displays of affection, so this was not great for me. We make camp after a rough goblin encounter and 7 immediately says that he wants to sneak into my tent. DM pauses and asks why. Ex-boyfriend, I'm going to, her. DM, Aisha. I quietly and uncomfortably respond, Aisha wouldn't do that. That's a no, 7. So Monk, ex-boyfriend, I sneak in then. DM takes a long pause. To talk to her? Ex-boyfriend, nope, to sleep with her. DM takes a longer pause. Actually, Aisha has taken a vow of celibacy. Sorry, I almost forgot. This wasn't on my backstory, but also wasn't far out of the realm of possibility. I did note on the backstory that she was somewhat prudish, so if our celibacy doesn't seem much of a stretch. Ex-boyfriend, so what? My character doesn't care about that. The DM, so you're going to force yourself on her. Ex-boyfriend, if I have to. He's literally grinning as he says this. Monk looks disgusted and shocked. DM just looks confused. I'm starting to feel myself shake and go into a panic attack. I can't say anything. I'm just focused on trying to breathe. The DM, I'm not allowing that. Seven doesn't do that. Just no. He pauses for a long time, takes off his glasses and rubs his face. Then he sighs and says, you know what guys, I've got a headache. Let's end this session early. As we pack up, the DM says he has a new dream for Aisha, and it's the norm for us to discuss those in private, away from Monk and ex-boyfriend. We move to a different room. DM gives me his wife's cell number and says to please call her if I ever feel unsafe. He tells me I have lots of friends who care about me and that I don't have to put up with anyone mistreating me. When we get in the car, ex-boyfriend starts ranting about Monk, said that when they were alone, Monk had made a comment about how gross he had been, and that ex-boyfriend had said his character was just as tidy to Aisha's body as he was to mine. DM never invited us to another session, though him and his wife did call me a few times after to check on me, something that sent ex-boyfriend into rages. Looking back on it, I can see that this game was the first time anyone had put into words what was happening in real time to me, and hearing it from an older man really began to fit pieces together in my head how unhealthy that relationship was. And yes, the things he tried to do to my character was similar to the things he did to me. It took a D&D campaign to make me and his friends realise how nasty he actually was. This was 6 or 7 years ago, but I've been thinking about this lately because a friend of mine has encouraged me to try out D&D again. This time with him as a DM and a male character inspired by a cross of Dick Grayson and a character from Feist novels. Hopefully second time's the charm. P.S. Sorry if most of the horror from the story happens out of character, but I only realised recently that this was when that horrible relationship started to crumble. And I'm only recently rediscovering my interest in TTRPGs, so the events have linked in my head and I thought it would be cathartic to share. To anyone who cares, I'm a long time out of that relationship and in a healthy one with a man my own age, one with a lot more listening, respect and care. Thanks for reading. Like I said, that was a very heavy one. Sexual assault, in my opinion, has no place in D&D. To be honest, I don't think sexual assault has a lot of place in much media. You know, but not D&D. I don't think it should be in games. I don't think it should be, I think a lot of real world problems should be avoided in D&D. Or at the very least, real world problems that genuinely happen in real life. I think, for example, fantasy racism is I don't think that's too bad, right? As long as you're not, trying to pretend to be fantastically racist when you're actually trying to be really racist. But I don't have actual racism in my games. Because first of all, I think it'd be stupid that in a world where, that guy's covered in fur, that guy's green, and that one's half devil, that for some reason the humans would be like, well, this guy's black. I don't I don't think it make any sense that they're like, well, this guy over here is black, and now I've got a problem with that. I don't think that makes sense. And I also don't think there's any need for it. And also, racism happens so often in real life that I don't think a player is going to want to come to a table and see more of that and, experience real life problems in the game. That's why I never have racism that is real. I don't have any kind of situations that are like that because I don't think it's necessary. And it's the same with sexual assault. Too many people have experienced sexual assault. They've experienced how uncomfortable it can make them and the things it does to you, that having somebody experience that in D&D now, I don't think that's right. Too many people have gone through it for it to be in D&D. And I think D&D is supposed to be a game where you have fun. It's a fun, interesting, almost second life, this insane fantasy life you live. And I do think that D&D needs to have, the lows, it needs to have bad moments or these horrific situations. But it doesn't need, SA. It doesn't. I think that's too much. I think bad things should happen in D&D because playing a game where bad things don't happen isn't going to be interesting. You can't make this amazing, compelling story if, the players can never experience a negative day. But you don't need something as horrific as SA to do it. And as we end this little bit off with, if anyone is struggling with partners who act like that, I think it's always important to remember that just because it's your partner doesn't mean they can do these things to you. It's no different if you feel forced with your partner or some stranger. At the end of the day, it's all wrong and it's all SA. I do hope if anyone's struggling with stuff like this that they can find a way out and have a good support system for it. Or I hope you can get out, and I hope you're doing good. Okay, on to our next one. A bit shorter and a little lighter, but it does seem like this may cover a bit of homophobia. So, if that is too much for you, I recommend skipping again. This story comes from User the Human Fighter. DM tries to gay shame a friend and me, then it gets worse. So a year ago, my friend John, my girlfriend Jane, and I started playing in a new group with two friends of ours, Kyle, the GM, a friend of theirs. We agreed on playing a light-hearted game focusing on exploration and curiosity. I made a male human fighter of low birth, who aimed to become some kind of champion, while John played a female elven wizard of noble birth, who wanted to find out who she was outside of her family. Over the first 5 or so sessions, John and I noticed that we had created the perfect opportunity for a cliché romance, with the low-born guy wanting to prove himself as out-of-reach high-born girl, and she wanting to acknowledge her for her personality, not her heritage. So we started RPing, the romance exchanging flirty banter, awkward compliments, and the like. Nothing sexual or dirty, as no one at our table is into that kind of stuff. We really had fun, and the other players liked it too. One of the characters had even tried to matchmake us. But soon the GM, Kyle, started trying to convince everyone at the table that we were gay, even though we were both straight, for romancing each other, even though we obviously only did so in character. For a while, we were like, okay, whatever. When this came up because we were having fun, nonetheless, and didn't want to open Pandora's box. But after a while, session 16 or 17, I think, our characters actually became a couple, and at that point Kyle really just lost it. First he tried to punish us in character, even though we didn't get that at the point and just thought he wanted to challenge us as a group. He then awkwardly tried to convince my girlfriend that I, being obviously gay, wasn't right for her, and that she should get together with him and his superior straight maleness. After that very awkward session, we decided we'd sleep it over and then discuss it with the group on the next day. But when we woke up, he had messaged John and me that he had to kick us from the table because he just couldn't be around gays. And he had then blocked us everywhere. He'd also messaged my girlfriend inviting her to stay at the table and dump me. At that point, even the two friends of ours who had tried to stay as passive as possible about the conflict decided that they could no longer play with him. We decided to start a new campaign with John as a GM, and I've been happily playing ever since. We wrote Kyle a letter, an actual letter, as he had blocked us everywhere, trying to explain our point of view and the problem with his homophobia, but he unsurprisingly never answered. This is a really goofy one, actually. I thought from the title it was going to be, maybe a bit triggering, but it's so stupid. Okay, first of all, who doesn't enjoy a bit of romance in D&D? There's been many times in games that I play where, listen, half the people play D&D so they can awkwardly flirt with their friends. That's half the fun, right? And I don't think it's a weird or, a genuine sexual or romantic thing when you roleplay with another player at the table. Roleplay a little romance. And I don't think it should ever be taken as reality. It's just a game where you're messing around, right? And even if it was reality and these guys were gay, who cares? I know. Who cares? I swear to God, it's always like these, well, I don't know if he's a Christian or anything like that. with this. It's very Christian behavior with homophobia like this. But it's always, people like this that care the most about gay people. I don't think gay people care about gay people this much, right? And it's always so funny. It just can't be around the gays, like he's gonna catch cooties or something. It's like, what do you want about? This time we have quite an interesting one here, a little bit different from our usual Reddit posts. This was brought to us by user I Hate Frosting. It's a screenshot of a review on a game store. Quite a scathing review, it seems. Okay, let's get into it. A 1-star review. I can't tell who sent it, it didn't show, but... Tonight I came to Adventure Games expecting to play D&D. It was my third time joining a group of individuals I'd come to like, and I always enjoyed our sessions. I chose to leave shortly after arriving, however, as the owner, redacted, decided to shout at us and act as a child in front of his whole establishment about a conversation we had last week that he deemed inappropriate, making more than one patron feel quite uncomfortable, I'm sure. He was gauche and didn't care to hear our side of the story, even though some of the group has been playing there for years without incident, and now they are no longer welcome. If that is the power of a review, then I hope this one strings, redacted, because neither I nor my friends will be frequenting your place of business any longer. Then we have the response from the owner. He's directly responded to this review. You are correct. We did deem the conversation your D&D group had last week about beating up women and getting around to strip clubs, no touch rules that you could assault those women, as inappropriate. We have a strict tolerance policy about such matters, and both players who engaged in the conversation admitted they were in the wrong. Their actions, admittedly, were a clear violation of our store's code of conduct and the rules set forth by Wizard of the Coast. There was no need for us to hear everyone else's side of the story. I'm sorry that Redacted's reaction made you uncomfortable. Maybe you're beginning to understand how the 13-year-old girl and his father felt when they were put in such an uncomfortable situation. They got up and left during the middle of the session. We have continued to have problems with this group for several years, which I am guessing they forgot to mention to you. However, those problems pale in comparison to the horrible things that were said by not only the players in this group, but by the DM, who is supposed to be leading the group and being responsible for the session. Since we work very hard to make our space one where everyone, especially women, feel safe and welcome, we feel it is in everyone's best interest that you and your friends do not return to our store. This one's just a golden one. Amazing. I mean, why would you post a review where you must know your conversation was inappropriate, right? I mean, talking about assaulting women and getting around to strip clubs no touch rule, even if it's in D&D, that's such a loser move. How can you sit there talking about how to imaginary assault women? What are you doing with your life, right? What? But you had this incredibly inappropriate conversation where apparently a young 13-year-old girl and her father was there as well, and then you get shouted at for this inappropriate conversation, as you should have been. I was surprised that father didn't just deck you, right? Because I mean, I can imagine that happening, right? But then you get told off for this inappropriate conversation, fairly told off, I'd say as well, and then you sit here being like, "What the fuck, guys?" What the fuck happened? And I think it's just a perfect response from the owner. I mean, I personally think it's incredibly important that you have a no tolerance rule to certain things. You know, again, as we just saw in the first story, sexual assault. I think any kind of player that tries to be like that should be kicked immediately. I don't think there's any kind of, what would you call it, any kind of defense against it or reason to do it. So I think anytime that kind of thing happens, get them gone. I don't think, as a DM, and as it wasn't the DM in this scenario who kicked them. It actually sounds like the DM was quite bad as well, but it was the game shop's owner who stepped in, which would be his responsibility in this scenario. So amazing job from him. But, you know, as a DM, this will happen to you a lot. If you have a lot of players or change players, often it will. You will see that some people are a mess, and some people try and get around your rules, and some people try and upset each other. If that happens, you have to put your foot down, and you have to take that role seriously. Because as a DM, it is your job to keep these people safe. You are the arbiter. You are, you know, people say, oh, DM's the god. It's a little joke, funny. But technically, that's right in a sense, because end of the day, nothing happens unless you let it to happen. You are the narrator of this universe, and you are the very, you know, words on the pages that make things happen, right? If you decide, hey, that's not happening, because that's wrong and weird, and it's going to make people uncomfortable, then that's what happens. So as a DM, with that being your role, or one of your parts, a very important part of your role, you have to take that incredibly seriously. And if you see things like this happening at your table, you need to get rid of these players, in my opinion, immediately. But Star Honor did this very well, did a very good job at this, got them gone. End of the day, I'm sure this star is going to be a lot more enjoyable to be in now. Neckbeard. Alright, that was our 3 stories we had today. Again, these are all from the subreddit RPG Horror Stories. Hey, if you can't wait till my next upload, go have a little read yourself. There's some you know, interesting horror stories here. I don't want to call them great, but they're entertaining in a watching a car burn kind of way. We did have a very heavy one at the start. I do hope everyone is okay. You know, I want this to be a place that is, you know, enjoyable and comfortable. So I hope anyone who may have had some triggers during that story is okay, and I hope anyone that decided not to listen to it, you are right in your position.